And so we punched some numbers and we're like, this is dead in the water. There's no question about it. It is dead in the water. And we're gonna look, I literally have a spreadsheet that I'm gonna be showing you guys, and I'm gonna walk you through the numbers. I'm gonna walk you through the calculations that I do so that you can literally see what happened here. And I can definitely tell you the funding, all of the funding goals you see on Kickstarter are myths. They are complete and absolute myths. So I know one of the questions that some people may have was like, Luke, you know, Dungeon Drifters was, your funding goal was $10,000. You hit your funding goal, so why are you canceling the project? Like, you're fully funded, right? Like, what's the problem? Right, because that's a myth. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And when I get to the spreadsheet and the numbers, you're gonna see how everything actually punches out. By the way, we are currently running a 50% off liquidation sale on thedmlayer.com. That's half off everything: hardcovers, PDFs, Into the Fey, Layers and Legends, The Secret Art of Game Mastery, and our Ultimate Bundle, which includes all our books. If you've been eyeballing something, now is the time to snatch it up. Just enter discount code HOLYCRAP50 at checkout to get 50% off your order. I'm not sure how long we're going to have this sale running, so I'd bust a move sooner rather than later. For instance, well, I mean, one of the things is that, you know, to just in general terms, to fund a Kickstarter these days, to get a Kickstarter going, you have to pay tons of money up front before you even launch your Kickstarter. You have to pay for artwork, you have to pay for graphic design, you have to do advertising. Like, you have to pay for your own time. I have a full-time employee, you know, that works on this stuff. We've been working on this since July. So you first of all, you're funding a lot of the work up front before it ever launches. And especially in the board game space, you know, with like D&D and TTRPGs, you don't have to have the entire product done and ready to go. You can kind of have it in the works or in process. But with board games, the audience is really expecting you to have the entire game done, like, or pretty darn close to it. They want to see an actual physical game, you know, that can be played. They want to see playthrough videos and stuff like that. And so we had to get a lot of stuff done in advance, you know. And so I mentioned in the video this morning that I had my sunk cost was, I have not, to be perfectly fair, I mentioned in the video that my sunk cost was what I already spent on Dungeon Drifters might have been around $50,000, and I don't know if that's an accurate number or not. I was just kind of spitballing. It's a possible number. We've been spending money on this since like July or August of last year, and some of this is like Zach has been working on it, and he's a full-time employee. He gets a pretty dang good salary, and so I'm paying him to work on it, you know. And so I don't know. He was probably half of his time was probably toward working on Dungeon Drifters, you know. I've been spending tons of my time working on it as well, tons of time. And so what do I value my time at? So there's opportunity costs too. That's a lot of opportunity costs, something else you could have been working on, you know, in addition to all the other things you've been paying, you know. We've spent like, I don't know, I'm just spitballing numbers here, but maybe $15,000 on advertising, which by the way is nothing, I was talking to another creator who was launching a project, and I'm not going to name names or talk about what the name of the project is because, you know, they didn't give me permission to directly name them, but they had spent over $200,000 already on advertising for their project, you know. Unfortunately, their project is doing very well so far, but that's what they had spent before the project launched. But ad spend usually ramps up during a project too. Like the first week or so, your ad spend is bonkers because that's the most important time to get some early momentum rolling on your project. And so I can easily imagine they probably are going to end up spending the same amount again by the time the project is over, another 200,000 or so, you know. So they might, I'm just hypothetically, they might end up spending 400,000 on advertising, you know, before it's all done and told. And so if their project doesn't make at least 400,000, they lose on the advertising alone, you know. Now you can say, well, yeah, but they made like 800,000 or something, you know, so that means that they can get the product and print it, you know, and they have a bunch of inventory that they can then sell to distributors and retailers and stuff. Yes, if they have that model in place, you could then you could break even on the front end and then make up on the back end. That's possible if you have all that in place, and store sales and stuff like that. That's possible, right? So, but like we only spent $15,000 in advertising because we usually we usually leverage our YouTube channel as letting our our followers and stuff know about our projects, and that's where we get a lot of our support from. So we historically haven't had to spend a whole bunch in advertising, and so we didn't, but we still spent more advertising Dungeon Drifters than we have on any other of our Kickstarters. Like 15,000 for advertising Dungeon Drifters compared to like almost nothing for our other projects, because we just haven't historically had to spend on advertising. So yeah, there's a lot of upfront cost that went into Dungeon Drifters. So that, but that money came from the capital from past Kickstarters. Like, we've had other Kickstarters, and one of the things you do with a Kickstarter is that you don't just, get a bunch of money and then spend it all. You say, okay, we made a bunch of money in this Kickstarter. Let's put aside $50,000 as capital to use to fund the next project, because as I mentioned a little bit ago, you have to create a lot of the project before you ever launch on Kickstarter. So when you have a good Kickstarter, you got to take some of that money, put it aside, and you use that to fund the next Kickstarter, right? That's the way it works. Once you get that rolling, you're then setting aside capital to fund the next one and get that rolling. That's kind of how that works. The funding thing is a complete myth. Well, I wanted to show, this is one Kickstarter right now that's launched that's doing very well, doing very, very well. And it looks sweet. This looks like an amazing Kickstarter. So if you want to go support this, go support it. It looks really cool. But I'm only pulling it up because I'm just using this as an example. And this is by Loot Taverns, who does a whole bunch of stuff, and they do great products and stuff. So I'm not knocking this at all. They're doing amazing and they deserve their success. I just pulled it up as an example here. They have a $25,000 funding goal. This is not the actual cost to fund this project. Okay, they have multiple people that work for them. I don't know how big they are as a company, but they're not small. Like, okay, I have one full-time employee. Loot Tavern has at least several. Okay, and then all of the other people they work with, contractors and stuff like that. Okay, $25,000. It did not. That's not a realistic actual funding goal. And I'm picking on them and I'm giving them as an example, but this is almost ubiquitous across every single Kickstarter that you see. These funding goals are not real numbers. These are made up numbers. Loot Tavern, I would not be shocked if they have spent $100,000 in advertising on this project. It would not shock me at all. That might be a conservative estimate. It might be much more than that, And when you consider that they're, I think this is like 1 or 2 books that they're making. It's at least 1 book by the image. But when you consider the writers they have to pay, the artists, the contractors and everything, when you consider their full-time staff and stuff, $25,000 to fund, when you consider the minimum print run that they'd have to do to get a good price on these books, this is not a real funding goal. And I'm giving this as an example, but my Kickstarter was $10,000. That's not a real funding goal. Almost nobody puts real funding goals. Almost nobody does, because it is the what do you want to say? It's the way Kickstarter works. At least it's the current paradigm of Kickstarter, that you put a very low funding goal so that you can fund as fast as possible, so that you can then say in your marketing and stuff, we are 3,000% funded, or 300% funded, or we funded in just 4 minutes. Like, these are all marketing tactics that you use for your project. And they're things that will instill confidence in backers or potential backers. So they'll go back your project. They're like, oh my gosh, you funded in 2 minutes. People must love your project. Okay, I will back it, And then you get that momentum going, with more and more backers. Or you say, hey, we are 359% funded, And if you go to Kickstarter, they literally list how much, like if we go to, I hope I'm not wrong about this. I'm pretty sure I saw that this morning. But if we just go to the games page, it literally says right here, I'm not wrong, I'm not making things up. It literally says here, 1,200% or 1,200% funded, right? 393% funded, 3,241% funded, So you can literally, it's like, and so like if everybody's like crazy funded, and let's just pick on these guys. Let's go see let's take a look at this one. Come on, baby. $10,000. That's not a realistic funding goal. That's again, I'm not picking on these guys. They're doing what everybody else is doing. They're doing what I did. Funding goals are horse crappery on Kickstarter. They're not realistic at all. Everybody's doing it for the reasons I just got done stating, but they're never realistic funding goals. What are they doing here? they're doing a book, at least one book. Yeah, they're doing at least one book by the picture, you know. So none of these things are realistic funding goals. Those projects I gave you examples of, I'm not at all talking bad about them. I'm just showing you quick examples. You know, both of those companies, Hit Point Press makes great products, Loot Tavern makes great products. So if you want to support those Kickstarters, rock and roll. And they look like they're doing very well. So I'm just giving you examples. I'm not trying to say I'm not saying picking on them, you know, and saying they're bad or anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm just giving you quick examples in the ttrpg space, because that's what most of us here are very familiar with. Let's take a look at the back end of this Kickstarter in particular, and we're going to walk through the finances so you guys can see how this works. Okay, I have prepared a spreadsheet for you, so we can actually walk through all of this. So these are numbers. You are seeing numbers on screen. I'm sure you all realize these are numbers. So basically, this is a formula that I use to calculate, it's an estimate of revenue for a project, okay? Now I'm gonna walk through the different cells and what these mean, all right? So for our Kickstarter Dungeon Drifters, we had a base game, Dungeon Drifters base game, and then we had a base game plus one expansion. And this was, these were our two tiers. We had the base tier at $80, and then the base plus one expansion at $150. All right, so we're gonna go cell by cell so you understand what this all means. The product cost. This is the quote from our manufacturer of what it would cost to make one of these games. So the base game would cost us $14. Now the base game plus one expansion, now the expansion was just as big as the base game, so it would be basically $28, 14 for the base game, 14 for the expansion. So this tier right here, where you get both games, would cost us $28 to make those, okay? Now I have put in originally the tariff that was announced was 54%. And I learned yesterday that the tariff actually had been increased on Monday. So on Monday, it went up to 100 and something percent. I can't even remember what it was. I was so busy preparing for my Kickstarter that I missed the news like for several days and was just too busy working on the Kickstarter to even know that the tariffs had been doubled. So in this calculation, we're gonna look at the original tariff that I was considering over the weekend of 54%, but the tariffs would increase. So it's 54%, the 54% goes against the cost to manufacture. It doesn't go against the MSRP or the actual price you sell it for. It's against the manufacturing cost. So for every base game that cost me $14 to pay the manufacturer, it would cost me $7 and some of tariffs that I'd have to pay, right? Now you also have to assume there are Kickstarter fees. Kickstarter takes 5%, so I got to account for that. And I have little formulas in the back here that are accounting for all this stuff, right? The payment processing is around 4%. I have to account for that. Backer kit. Backer kit doesn't exactly take 3% off the top. It doesn't quite work that way, but I do have paid ads through them, and they take a commission off the paid ads, and they do take 3% off from what I raise in backer kit for shipping. Like what I raise in backer kit for shipping, they take 3% off from that too. Shipping and handling, they take 3% off that. So I put 3% here as a rough estimate to account for all of the different things. So this is not a perfect estimate, but we're just throwing it here as it's a spitball. It helps us kind of see. All right, then this right here just totals up all of the fees and the project cost. So it totals up all the different fees. That's all this cell does. Now this cell right here tells me my total profit per item, all right? And so really what it does is it takes this first cell, the Kickstarter price, and then it subtracts the product price and the total fees, right? So for each game at $80 that I sell, right, I'm gonna make a profit of $48, all right? But bear with me here because it's not as good as you think it is, all right? Bear with me. And remember, we've already spent tons of money getting here. We spent $50,000 plus, or whatever it happened to be, I don't know, to get here. All right, so then we have this cell just tells us what the margin is. All right, you like to know what your margin is, right? Okay, now sales ratio. What this is this is a way for me to estimate what ratio I have of people that get the base game to people that get the expansion. Now it just so happens I have another cat that wants to come up here and bother me. we actually had about 80% of people that were getting both the base game and the expansion, which is really good, right? About 80% of people were getting the $150 tier. That's amazing. That's spectacular. That shocked me. I expected it to be more like 70% get the base game and 30% get both. But 80% were getting both of them, which is great. For the purpose of this calculation, I am making the assumption that that would have slowly shifted over the course of the project so that we would have more people getting just the base game and fewer people getting both. So for the purposes of this spreadsheet, I entered the base game and the expansion as only 70%, and then the base game as 3%. All right, now we get to the fun part. All of these formulas right here start to calculate our gross sales, that's before expenses, and then our actual profit, the gross profit. Now there's a big asterisk here because that's not actual profit, and we're gonna walk through this and I'm gonna show you why it's not actual profit. All right, so when this project closed, let's go into Dungeon Drifters. Hold on, let's go into Dungeon Drifters, and let's see how many backers we actually had. Then that way we can put in actual numbers. So we had 302 backers. So there were 302 backers. So if I put in 302 backers, you can see, look at my gross sales, 38,000. This is pretty close. Now, yes, technically we had 41,000. It's possible some of those backers, a lot of backers pledge extra because it helps them to pay for the shipping costs later on. So it's possible some of these backers pledged extra, you know, and to be perfectly honest, these formulas are just an estimate. It's not perfect, right? But anyway, you can see that it's pretty close. So right now we had, you know, let's just say it was $38,000 that had been backed. We would have had theoretically a gross profit of 23,000 right now as the project stands. But this is all theory, and we're going to get into why this isn't actually true. Now technically, we probably could have expected to double the project, okay? Which means that we probably would have maybe gotten to around 500 total backers, right? We probably would have gotten to around $64,000 on this project. Probably. I think that's a safe guarantee. It's possible we would have gotten to 600 backers and had around 77,000, but a more conservative, probably more accurate estimate would have been around 5,000 backers for 64,000. Now, if that would have happened, let's pretend that's what would have happened, because we're kind of like projecting this out. So we're basically, I'm showing you the math and the rationale and how we decide whether we're going to pull the plug or not. Okay. So that projects it out to 64,000. Now, gross profit after expenses would have been 38,000, except ad spend. We were planning on spending another $10,000 during the project while it's live to try to like get more sales and stuff. Artwork, we still had to pay about $8,000 on artwork. And then there are always unexpected costs, things that happen that come out of nowhere. They always happen on projects like this. So I put another $15,000 here because I know something's gonna happen. You know, something crazy is gonna happen that I'm gonna have to fix. So I put some extra money here as like a buffer, a barrier, a safeguard, you know? So that means that if we had let this project go to completion, we had gotten 500 backers, $64,000. The actual amount of profit would have been $5,000. Okay? Except remember though, we've already spent $50,000 on the project. Okay? So we're still in the red, but it gets worse. It gets worse because these aren't actual real numbers. In one regard, when you order board games like this from the manufacturers, and all the manufacturers that I'm aware of are in China, when you order board games like this, they have minimum order quantities. So in this scenario, I would have only needed around 500, 600. I would have actually only needed around 600 board games. It's like 350, well, of the 350 plus one, I would have needed 500 of the base game and then 350 of the expansion, right? That's all I would have needed. But there are minimum order amounts, so that doesn't work. that's not actually true. And now I'm going to show you the rest of the spreadsheet. These right here will show you our minimum order amounts, which are 1,000 units. The manufacturers require usually 1,000 units minimum order. Now, there are some that require 1,500 minimum orders. The one we were quoting with, that we were probably going to work with, was 1,000 minimum units. So if we would have had to get 1,000 minimum units, this gets even worse. So this is Formula B. Now, Formula B, pretty much everything is the same, except that I took out the product cost. And the reason I took out the product cost is we have to consider the minimum order for the base game and the expansion, okay? And so in this formula, we have $1,000, or 1,000 units and 1,000 units. Plus we got to consider the tariff, right? If we're paying $14 for a game and we have to order 1,000 of them, that's $14,000. But we have to pay a 50% tariff on that. That's $7,500 some dollars. So we got to pay our tariffs here. So now when you put in, considering the minimum order amount, when you put in your gross sales, which up here didn't look that bad, right? You're still kind of making profit, $5,000. Now, when you consider the minimum order amount, your gross sales are this is your expenses, but once you put in this amount you have to pay here to the manufacturer for the minimum order, plus the tariffs, you're now $20,000 in the negative. So this project right here, Dungeon Drifters, if we had continued forward, we would have probably had about 500 backers, and we would have lost $20,000. $20,000. We've already lost 50,000. We would have lost another 20,000. Okay, but it gets worse. It gets worse because guess what? Remember what I said? The tariff. I missed the announcement about the tariff going up and doubling on Monday. So it wasn't actually 0.54% tariff or whatever, 54% tariff. It was over 100. It was over 100. Well, I don't know what it was. It was like 120, and I think it might have been raised again. I don't know what we're at right now. We're in a weird position right here, and I don't want to talk too much about it because then we get into politics and people get all ruffled. So, but the tariffs now are somewhere over 100%. It's 145% now. Thank you, chat. So it's 1.45. 145% tariffs. So it gets even worse. Now let's go down here. So if I'm paying 145% tariffs, if I pay $14,000 to get it manufactured, I'm now paying $20,000 in tariffs, right? My final number, I am in the red, $44,000. I've already spent 50. If I continue this project as is, I'm in the red, $44,000. Where's that money coming from? I don't have it. Like, we would have literally closed out Dungeon Drifters and my business probably would have had to declare bankruptcy. It would have been over. Because where's that money coming from? It's not coming from anywhere. You know, like, yeah, you can make it you can make it in different ways maybe, but I don't have a mechanism to make $44,000 just to get flush. Okay, so this is bonkers, right? Now, who knows with these tariffs, what's going to happen to them? Now, it's possible in 6 months, it might be down to zero, right? It's possible that this project probably would have been starting to go to production in about a year and a half, let's say. Maybe in a year and a half, they're at 200%, 500%. I have no idea. All I can do is make decisions based upon what I know right now. And right now, it was nasty. I'm looking at a massive loss. Like, I'm not going to get better than this. I'm not going to get better than 500 backers at $64,000 or so. That's probably what I'm looking at the end of this project. I'm looking at a massive loss. It just gets bonkers, okay? And so you're like, well, why'd you pull the plug? This is why we pulled the plug. Because it's like, we're dead. We're dead, man. If you continue forward, everything, you just blow it all. You're done. You're done, right? So this is nasty. However, it gets worse. Manufacturing costs right now were $14 per game. But in a year and a half, what are manufacturing costs gonna look like? Let's just pretend for funsies. that manufacturing costs go up by, let's make it reasonable. Let's say it goes up by 10%. Plus 14 times 1.1. There we go, $15. Let's just say it goes up to about 50. Let's round it to 16. All right, let's say it goes up to 16. So here we have 16 plus 16, 32. It goes up to 16 and 32, right? Because manufacturing costs usually go up. So now, instead of $44,000 in the red, we're $55,000 in the red, right? But it gets worse. It always gets worse. I'm walking you through this, guys. I'm just walking you through this stuff so you're aware. So we accounted for the raise in manufacturing costs. Now we need to consider warehousing costs, okay? Because remember, I had 500 backers. We only needed about 500 of these things. That means that I have 500 extras of the base game and the expansion. What am I gonna do with these? Well, I'm gonna put them in a warehouse and I'm gonna try to sell them, okay? So now I have to consider warehousing costs. Do you guys know what my last bill for warehousing costs was with the product that I have right now? $900 for 1 month for warehousing costs with the products that I have right now. If I get a bunch of board games and add them on top of that, my warehousing costs go up. Every month I'm paying more for warehousing costs, right? So I gotta sell these things. Now here's the thing. Think about it this way, okay? If my Kickstarter only funded at like $60,000, what does that tell me? There aren't that many people interested in it, right? There's not a whole lot of interest. If I'm having trouble selling the basic concept of this project, the Kickstarter, and I'm not doing well on Kickstarter, do I really think that I'm going to do well selling this game afterwards? Or is it probably gonna sit in my warehouse and collect dust, and I'm gonna struggle to sell it, and I'm just gonna keep paying warehousing fees, right? So like, if tons of people loved it as a Kickstarter, then I can probably be pretty confident that I can sell it afterwards, right? But if they're not supporting it as a Kickstarter, then I'm starting to wonder, is this gonna sit in my warehouse and I'm just gonna lose money, paying warehouse fees, right? So that's something else you gotta consider, right? And then, I've already mentioned this a couple times, so I'm not gonna belabor the point, but none of this accounts, this massive loss of 55,000 or something does not account for the capital for future projects, Not only can I not pay this, but I no longer have any money to pay for future projects like other Kickstarters to create more books and stuff for, that people wanna buy or whatever, to keep the business going. Because at some point, you have an old book and nobody cares about it anymore. Its life cycle has been gone through and nobody's gonna buy it. You have to have new products, new books that you're putting out there that people are gonna be excited about and wanna buy, you know what I mean? So, and especially when you consider, that I'm mostly, my fans on my YouTube channel are the ones that are, following me and excited about what I'm doing and buying a lot of my stuff. So if you've already bought the books, you're not going to keep buying more of them. You need new books, and so you need capital for future endeavors, for future projects to keep the wheels running. It's just the way it works. Okay, so that is the basic breakdown of all the math and stuff, and you can see that funding goals are BS. All right, $10,000 is a laugh. So your next question is, okay, Luke, so why didn't you just list a funding goal of what it would actually take to fund it? Okay, well, let's try to see what it would actually have taken to fund this project. All right, and then we're gonna walk through how this works and why almost nobody lists realistic funding goals. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. So basically, we're gonna pretend, let's just, for the sake of this exercise, let's pretend that the 145% tariffs remain in place. Let's just pretend they remain in place. All right, we're just gonna use the best we know at this moment. So how much would I have had to make? How many backers? This green number is how many backers, by the way, I have. I don't think I explained that, but the big green box is my number of backers. And everything else just kind of calculates. The way that I have this set up, everything calculates when I update that green box, okay? I don't think I explained that before, I'm sorry. So how much would I have actually had to raise to get this positive, to break even? Okay, break even point. Was it 1,000 backers? At 1,000 backers, did I break even? I broke even. I broke even. I broke even. Actually, there's a shift that happens though. Once I get enough backers that my minimum order quantity doesn't matter anymore, then it starts to get a little bit different. Now, once I get, and here I'm kind of at that point. I'm actually not quite at that point yet. I'm not quite at that point yet. So we can't actually look at this number quite yet. But once this gets high enough, I'm probably close to being there right there. So if I had raised 141,000, then I would have had enough backers getting the games so that I wouldn't have to worry about my minimum order quantity anymore, because I would be I'm already have enough people buying it from the Kickstarter, and then this number would start to actually work again. So this number is no longer accurate. I would actually start to make more money. So once I hit this like critical threshold of being able to hit that minimum order quantity, well then at that point, you know, the numbers get a lot better and things start to, and then you actually start to make some profit. But even at this point, if I had made $141,000 gross, that's what you see on the actual Kickstarter page, okay? I probably still, my gross sales were 141,000. My gross profit with crazy tariffs, we have to assume the tariffs, you know, my gross profit would have been 51,000. After my ad spend and other things, my actual profit would have been about $18,000. So I would have broke even and I would have $18,000 as capital to use toward another Kickstarter, okay? This is still very bad. At least you're breaking even and you have a little bit extra. But this is a very bad scenario. It's still a very bad scenario. It's still very, very bad, okay? Now, let's say you got 1,500 backers. Well, now you're at almost 200,000. Let's just nudge this a little bit so we're at 200,000, just so we can have a nice clean number. All right, there we go. So now, if we had made $200,000 on the project, now I have an actual profit of $42,000. Now you have something fairly sizable to use toward another project, okay? Toward another project. But remember, me personally, Luke, I have not made any money off from this. Like, I didn't go out and I wasn't able to go buy a new pair of shoes, you know, or pay my electrical bill or something. I didn't actually make any profit. That 42,000, we're just considering capital, right? But if I personally want to take a cut from the project, because look, I'm working hard, right? So I should probably, you know, get the fruit of my labors. So if I want to take any sort of cut from this project, I got to take from that 42,000, right? Which means we have less for future projects, all right? So we actually, if I want to be able to take anything and derive any benefit from doing all this work of running this project, I actually have to make more than the $200,000, right? Okay, so I'm just trying to paint the picture of what this looks like. Because so far, Luke has not made any money. Personally, the business, yes, but Luke, no. So far with $200,000, I'm literally just paying everybody else. Luke's not making money, okay? So I just want to make sure that's clear, all right? And I'm running a business, so the goal is to make money, okay? Nobody here in chat goes to their 9-to-5 or wherever you work and tells their boss, hey, you know what? I don't need a paycheck. Just don't pay me tomorrow. Don't pay me again. Nobody does that, right? Everybody needs to get paid. So I'm just trying to paint the picture here, right? Now, what if the tariffs change though? Well, the tariffs change a lot, don't they? Right? The tariffs change the finances dramatically. If the tariffs evaporated and went to zero, look at the difference. That's huge. Instead of making 44,000 or whatever on the project, I make over 100,000 on the project. Now I can set aside, with my project making 200,000, I can set aside a bunch of money of capital for future projects, and Luke gets to actually take some money home for my hard work of all the work I've done on this project. And oh, by the way, my full-time employee, Zach, he gets a bonus based upon how our Kickstarters perform. He gets a decent base, his base salary is good, but he gets a nice bonus based upon how our Kickstarters perform. So his bonus is based on this Kickstarter. I don't know how much he would have made off from this right here. So $10,000 or something. He would have gotten a decent bonus if we had done this. So he would have gotten a bonus. I would have been able to take some money home. We would have had some actual money for the Kickstarter too, or for future Kickstarters or future projects and stuff, right? So the tariffs are huge. The tariffs make a big difference, right? Big difference. So yeah, the tariffs definitely came into play in considering what you're going to do with this project, whether you're going to pull the plug or not, you know? Now, if there had been no tariffs, we still would have been in trouble. Like, let's go back to here. Let's pretend there were no tariffs, and let's take this back down to our 500 backers. Like, even if there were no tariffs, we're still losing money, right? I mean, even if there were no tariffs, we still lose money on this project, right? So that would not have changed. The tariffs would not have changed the decision, right, based on the finances. So when you look at a game like this, or a game like this, you know, it should be painfully obvious to you now that $25,000 is not their actual funding goal. You know, like, that's not what they actually need to even break even on this project, let alone make all the books, you know, let alone pay their staff and all the people that work for them. It's just, nobody puts a realistic funding goal. It's not a thing. Low funding goals sound deceptive. Yeah, I mean, sure, you can look at it that way. It's the game everybody plays. It's the game everyone plays. Well, another game that everybody plays are stretch goals. Stretch goals are another stupid game that people play. It used to be back in the day when Kickstarter was just beginning that stretch goals were actually real, you know, where if you raised this amount of money, that gave you enough money to go make this other thing and to make the project bigger and better. Stretch goals aren't real anymore. Stretch goals are they're like a song and a dance. They're mirrors. They're smoke and mirrors. Most stretch goals are already planned to be implemented in the product ahead of time. They're already planned. They're already planning on doing them, right? And not only are they already planning on doing them, but you may notice that for many Kickstarters, pay attention, for many Kickstarters, they don't tell you the numbers of the stretch goals. They don't tell you that we have 10 stretch goals. This one's at 25,000, this one's at 100,000, this one's at 150, this one's at 2,500, 2,000, $250,000, this one's at $500,000, this one's at 1 million. Most people don't tell you all the numbers because they're not set in advance. They adjust those numbers on the fly based on the momentum of the project so that they can basically plan to hit stretch goals along the way, because stretch goals make people excited and get enthusiasm and comments and stuff and get engagement, which makes the project do better. So most people are adjusting stretch goals on the fly and they're not telling you what they are all in advance, right? So stretch goals are, now some people do tell you what they are literally all in advance. Some people do, but many projects don't. They don't reveal the numbers until you start hitting them, and then they'll tell you what the next one is and the next one. And they literally are adjusting the frequency of the stretch goals based upon the velocity of the project and how quickly they think they're going to get the next stretch goal. This is what many projects do. They're it's a fabrication. It's a game. You know, many of these things, many parts of a Kickstarter are a game. The whole idea of a Kickstarter to begin with was the original idea of a Kickstarter was, I don't have money. I have an idea, but I don't have any money. If you give me money, I will then go make the thing, right? But nowadays, you almost have to have the thing made to begin with. And especially in board games, if we didn't have a playthrough, a demo, like somebody in chat was just asking, did I even post a demo? Exactly. If I hadn't already made the game and had a prototype and did a demo, people would have been like, yeah, I don't even know what the game looks like. I can't see you playing it. Like, I'm not going to buy a game based upon a little bit of artwork on a page. You know what I mean? And so people want to see that it's real, right? And so it's not like it was before. You got to pretty much have the thing made already. And so the whole idea of a Kickstarter is like, if you're going to be really successful at it, you got to have the thing made already, you know, for all intents and purposes, you know. So then the Kickstarter is really just pre-orders. That's all it really is. Now, Kickstarters are amazing. I'm going to keep on using them, and the companies that do use them, I think, are very smart to do it, you know, but it's essentially a pre-order mechanism. Many of these bigger companies have it already made. It's already ready to go. The stretch goals are probably done too, you know, and it's just a pre-order system, which is fine. You know, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, as long as we all recognize what it is. I think that's part of my purpose of this live stream and walking through everything is I want to roll back the curtain a little bit and show you guys that funding goals are horse crap. Stretch goals are mostly horse crappery as well. Like a lot of these things are horse crap. It's just, most people don't tell you it. Most people don't want to tell you that, but that's what it is. And that's not like I'm not saying that's a bad thing, or it's like a negative, like, bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying that this is what it is. And then you can make up your mind whether you think it's good or bad or whatever, or you can be neutral about it. All I know is that that's the game, and I want to play to win. I didn't win this time, but I try to play to win. And if that's the game, I'm going to play the game. Sympaticos brings up a great point. And this is why everybody sets low funding goals. Sympaticos says a real funding goal looks daunting to people and disincentivizes early backers. Exactly. Many people, if you came into this Kickstarter right here, and I bet you that this project right here, and I'm picking on this one, but I think Loot Taverns is awesome, and I think this product looks really cool, right? I'm just using an example. I want to be clear. I'm not saying there's anything negative about this. This looks pretty cool to me. But if you came into this project, I bet you that their break even is probably around $500,000. I bet you it's around $500,000, because they have a large staff, right? They've probably spent a lot of money on advertising. There's a lot of expenses. I bet you their break even somewhere around $500,000. I bet you. I could be wrong, right? But let's just pretend, if this project put now this project, to be fair, they're going to make about 600,000. I think this is going to make about 600 to 700,000. I think that's what it's going to actually make, right? Now, if they put, and somebody, when this ends, I want somebody to email me and let me know if I was right or wrong. Because I'm just curious now. Am I going to be right about it? If they put on here that their funding goal was $500,000, would you back it? Seriously, would you back it? You would be like, what? This will never fund. Are you crazy? Now they will. They're going to hit 700 probably. But if you came in here and this was $500,000, or even 250,000, would you back it? Or would you be like, pfft? What if it was 100,000 as a funding goal? Would you back it? Probably not, right? Probably not. So yeah, you can't, if you put a funding goal that's a realistic funding goal, a lot of people aren't going to back it.